Welcome back, guys, to the Enablers podcast.
Hey
Woohoo!
guys.
Welcome back, guys.
Guys, have you guys ever played the game Among Us? You know, that
Mm,
game where
Yes.
you have those cute cartoons walking around and you slice people in half and then you go around the circle and talk about who's the one who killed everyone else.
yeah, I have, and it's a game I played over at my friend's place, Ewing's place, and with a group of people. It was okay. It was not that fun, maybe because I never became the imposter. But I just find the whole application quite niggly, kind of hard to text because you have to invert your phone, and then nah, didn't quite enjoy it. Some things that I think is not as good as Werewolf.
Mm,
I feel like, my God, if you were the imposter, you'd be a terrible imposter because you have this evil laugh when you're like being mean. So chances are people already know you're an imposter and they're probably gonna run away from you.
That's the thing. Like, it's hard for the game to be played with everyone in the room. I think because
Yeah.
if you're being chased by someone, then chances are the person will be like, "Oh no, don't chase after me! No, no, don't chase after me! Oh, I'm dead!" And then obviously we know who killed who. The game is supposed to be played in a separate, like you're supposed to be separate rooms and unable to hear how people are reacting to it because people cannot
Mm.
not react, right?
yeah, and the whole point is to find the imposter, right? So you don't want to just appear in front of people like, oh, giggly giggling.
Okay, so speaking about being an imposter in a game, this leads to the whole point of this conversation of this podcast. So the topic is about imposter syndrome. Is it a very general thing, or is it more prominent to women um, or women of color specifically? So essentially, this topic started out because I felt I had basically had a meltdown on Thursday recently, where I felt like an imposter whilst doing all my interview prep. So I'm in the midst of hopefully getting a job, fingers
Mm,
crossed, and then looking at the job description and then my application. I'm like, oh, can I actually do this? Like, am I just being a fraud? Um, yeah, essentially that's for this whole conversation.
I'm a bit surprised you mentioned about like women in color because I've certainly experienced my fair share of imposter syndrome, and I've had it plenty from my guy friends too, as well as
Mm.
my girlfriend. So, not sure why we should be singling out like just women or women in color. A
Yeah.
reason why you bring it
So
up?
yeah. So basically, this term was initiated by two women. So they are Susanna Eames and Pauline Rose Clance in the 70s. So this term
Mm,
came out then, where originally it is only thought to apply to high achieving women, but then since then it has been recognized as more widely experienced because back then it's not common to see high
mm,
achieving women because you would only, women are meant to be, stay at home in the kitchen, and it's only like
I
guys
see.
who go out and get the bread and butter. And so women felt as if like they have to prove themselves more, and sometimes they feel like they don't belong in like a field full of men. Whereas now people are championing women and trying to pursue and go as far as
Sure.
they can.
Mm,
But yeah, no, essentially now the term is definitely more broad, and it's applicable to a lot of people. So it's not specifically just for women. So what is exactly the definition of imposter syndrome? It can be narrowed down by a lot of different things, but I think this definition I found on the internet is actually pretty sufficient. So the definition it gave was it's an internal experience of you believing that you are not as competent as others perceive you. So, and it mostly applied to intelligence and achievement, which links to perfectionism.
so, is it just related to competency, or can it also be applied to, for example, say, I don't feel like I am Malay enough, or I don't feel like I am Asian enough from a cultural perspective. Like I feel like I'm imposter in some
Um,
relative gathering or something like that. Or is this just really just from a
yeah,
intelligence, skills, abilities perspective?
no, I definitely don't think so because I'm pretty sure because essentially imposter syndrome is you feeling like you're a fraud or a phony. So if you say you are Malaysian, but then you look not like Malaysians at all, and then people will say like, "Oh, you look very different," then you start questioning like, "Do you actually belong?" So
Mm,
it's in
that's a
the
good
end, it's
point.
like your own feeling of do you feel belong or do you fit in this mold of what they call a Malaysian
Right.
textbook Malaysian. And I think it's not necessarily just intelligence, it also happened in sports. I remember going to my first sprint event and I'm not much of a sprinter, so I definitely felt the whole imposter syndrome then, like these
Mm,
guys are way faster than me, like what the heck am I doing here?
mm,
So I think it applies in any situation where you feel a bit out of place, where you're not comfortable and it's not your normal scene, and you feel a bit like you're pretending to fit in, or you just feel a little bit out of place. I don't know. I think that's just my understanding of what imposter syndrome is.
I see. All right. So you basically feel phony or you feel fake.
Yeah,
Mm, okay.
yeah. I think I remember saying I remember saying this to you guys where I had someone who wanted to take me out on a date and wanted to took and he planned to take me to this really fancy place, and I don't do fancy that well.
Mm.
Um, and then in the end, I told him, and then we basically just went to a little cafe instead.
Yeah, because you felt like you
Yeah.
didn't fit in a fancy place and you don't belong there, and then like you'll be an imposter trying to be all bougie and shit, but in reality, like you don't, you know, you humble, you you
Hashtag humble.
yeah.
I think it's not just a matter of not fitting in, but I think it was like a first date. I don't really know this guy, and it's like a lot of new things that I have to pay attention to. So the last thing I want to have to do is to feel very out of place whilst I'm trying to learn about this person. I think I remember going to like really nice fancy place to have food with my friends, and that was fine. It's not my cup of tea, but it was a good experience nonetheless. So I think this is more of like applicable to um, a new settings for you that you don't necessarily would go to, but not just that would affect your your view of things for the rest of your life. I think I don't know. So like work setting or things that you want to get involved in. So restaurants and stuff like that, not so much, I guess.
I'm sure you felt like an imposter before, Mugat. What's your most recent episode for being an imposter? Can you share with us?
I mean, it's a plenty, but um, I think most of the imposter syndrome came through when it came to jobs, and it started off probably when I started applying for jobs, even when in my
Mm,
final year of university. I didn't think I was good enough at all, but nonetheless, I was trying it out anyway. So every time I went for the interview, I had this huge sense of self doubt. But I had to project confidence and capability. And to some extent, even when I got the job, it was almost unbelievable because I didn't think I was nearly as qualified. But hey,
yeah.
got a job, take it, right?
Mm.
Fake it till you make it. That's the phrase. And even in the job, at some point, I remember like it was 4 years into working in JP at the time, and I thought I was doing pretty all right. Like I had become more experienced, and even though I had some self doubt, it was I thought only internal, never externalized,
Mm.
and was a good check and balance for me to always be aware that there's room for self improvement. But then my manager kind of pulled me aside and said, like, why do you doubt yourself a lot? And I was like, well,
Mm,
it's obvious. Like, I need you to, there's no time for you to wait to step up because I told her that for me, it's about confidence coming from gaining more knowledge, because at the time I had just moved into a new role, and there was still a lot to learn. It was only like 3 or 4 months into this new job, so the landscape was still very vast.
But it's weird, isn't it? Because you don't strike me as someone who's not confident,
Yeah.
and yet you still experience it.
Well,
Why do you think so?
It's just because I project confidence once I become good at the subject matter. But the subject matter can sometimes be quite big, right? And it takes time to learn everything. And in the past, the subject matter has always been limited to a textbook, for example. And the proof is always in your ability to score a certain amount of marks, or the number of questions you could answer effectively. And the universe was always limited in the past when you were a student. So when it came to studying and exams, down the line, thankfully, I think I've always managed to get the marks I want. But when it came to work, the universe just expands, and there's no textbook, there's no, limit to what you need to know. It's always evolving based on the landscape, the type of people you interact with. So it became something that is almost like a moving target. The more you learn, the more you don't know. And this is what my manager said was profound to me, because she said, you can never know everything for you to feel confident.
Yeah.
And the time to step up is now. So it's not to say that you need to be an imposter all the time. It's about recognizing being confident, however, being confident in dealing with the uncertainty.
Oh, yeah, that's good. That's really good.
Couldn't sleep for 2 weekends, for 2 days over the weekend, because I was like deeply shaken by my manager's intervention.
That's I think you mentioned about fake it till make it the beginning of your sentence, and I like to kind of tease that out. Do you think that statement of faking it till you make it is one of the remedy of an imposter syndrome? Because a lot of people don't really know what they're doing, and they just pretend as if they do know, and then figure it out on the way, and then realize, actually, yeah, I did that, done and did it. So do you think this whole, I feel like a lot of people are doing this faking till you make it.
I think we all would fake it and make it somehow, but it's a matter of how far you stretch that phrase, right? Because you can fake something in terms of you can fake your confidence, or you can fake your competency about, yes, I can do this, and then learn the ropes and actually master it as you go on the job, as you do it. But it's about, I think, recognizing that you have that ability to learn and master it, rather than faking it and then not learning and not doing it, right? It was just enough to push yourself into what we discussed in the previous episode, into your growth zone, where you get into the mode of, okay, I need to grow and fulfill that missing gap, so that you learn about it. But you don't stretch it all the way where, oh, I can do this, I can do that, like spurting out magic in a way. That's not what you should be doing with the phrase, I believe.
I think on that point, right? When you're confronted in a situation where your self-doubt starts to arise and you start questioning yourself, the two course of actions could be, one, entertaining that feeling and manifesting that. Someone asks you a question, you're not sure, you say, actually, I don't know, I'm really not familiar, I have to kind of like do more research. And number two, instead, not play into the uncertainty and like that take over the response. However, just instead project confidence and be like, I think this is what it is. However, there are some risks in the unknown, but we can check that. But for the time being, this is what our assumption should be. And this is what I found to be an effective approach at work, because especially when you're in a corporate setting, uncertainty and, when you can easily waver and you're like floating with your opinion and you don't really know, you can be eaten alive now, basically. And recently as well, when I was doing a calculation for like my manager in my new job, and it turned out that one number stood out as quite high, and
Mhm.
then because it was new for me, I was still like checking the calculations rigorously, and he said, "Oh, this number looks high?" Question mark on ping. And in my mind, it was like 1,000 things. Like, oh my god, did I do it right? Did I do it wrong? What should I say? Then my natural intuition or instinct was to say, "Oh, let me check." And I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna check. I've checked this a million times. And as much as I'm still doubtful, I'm just gonna say why it's high. And it's high because of so and so reasons.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, okay. Instead of me saying let me check, that means I have to go check again, and then I
Yeah.
still have to like figure things out. And then if my response to having checked is subpar and not meeting expectation, then what, I have to check again? No, I'm not checking again. So yeah, fake it till
it's
you make
it's
it.
it's funny how your manager and you sort of push back and forth like, oh my god, are you an imposter? No, I'm not an imposter. Are you? Like, no, this is my stance on it. This is my rationale logic. Take
No,
it if you want it. But
no,
it's the same thing about, I see more progressive companies nowadays. Whenever they put a job board out, a job spec out, they're like, it's fine if you don't fulfill all the requirements here, because
Yeah.
based on certain level of skill sets or experiences that you've done in your previous work or at school, we can sort of have a calculated projection of you may be able to do it, or you can learn it within a certain period of time that we find acceptable.
Okay, so this is really interesting because obviously I'm now in the midst of, applications, applying for
Mm,
jobs and interviewing. And I was talking to one of my friends, and he was helping this one architecture firm to basically revamp their job application board because they're not getting enough women to apply for the position. It's not that they don't have enough women in their company, but it's just so happened that they're just
mm,
getting a lot of men in their applications. And one of the reason was the wordings that they use on their um, job description. And this is like a common thing where women would only apply if they
mm,
met all the essential criteria. And I think guys tend to overestimate what they can do. And even
uh,
if they don't meet half of the job applications criteria, they would
mm,
still apply.
mm,
So as soon as she changes like some of the words to make it more, approachable and not like
uh,
this is like rigid. This is it. Like you meet this or you don't. If you don't, you don't apply. That kind of thing. So she
uh,
didn't mention like specifics, but she said like it's just the wording that. And then after she changed that, they were seeing a lot more women in the application.
oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah. So imposter syndrome is it's very there's like two sides I suppose in terms of men and women, and because men would always assume that they can learn on the job and they have the stronger attitude of fake it till you make it, whereas women tend to be a bit more reserved in that end. So they would only put out the things that they know and things that they are very confident, and things that they're not sure, they don't put it out. Because I remember even when I was doing my first CV, I was getting one of my colleagues to look at it, and then she turned to me and she said, "You could do way more than this. I know you could do way
Mm,
more than this. You're not
yeah.
putting it out there." So, and then she told me like she read one of the guys' CV who was the same position as I am, and then I remember her said this very, very vividly. She said, he could do a lot less than you, and his CV is like, it's pretty up there, so you got to step it up. I'm like, okay, good to
mm.
know.
Bitter pill, hard to swallow.
All right, so obviously in every little thing, there's always the pros and cons of our feelings and our emotions, and it doesn't escape with an imposter syndrome. There's also its pros and cons, but I think there's a lot more cons than it is pros. But one of the things I agree to the pro side of the imposter syndrome is that it fuels you. to push yourself a little further, to go a bit more than you normally would do, because essentially it's like a type of motivation per se. So you work harder and you learn more than the rest of the people, because you feel like you have to, um, you know, be prove to yourself or prove to your boss or prove to other people or your family or whatever.
Mm,
Um, but then the con side of it, if you keep doing this over and over again, if you keep um, following this trend of being imposter, that you have to do more, you can reach a burnout stage. And then you're downplaying your achievements, because you would always think
mm,
that your achievement is down to luck and not your effort at all, even after the amount of hours you put in, the effort, you never think your achievements are recognizable. Um, and then the other cons is the constant need of turning yourself on, because you're in fear of not living up to your own expectations. So then you tend to set up huge goals, and when you don't achieve it, you get really disappointed and you feel like a failure. Does that sound familiar?
No, not at all.
Well
no, I
then.
mean, if I were to share a bit, like if I were to share a bit my experience with my own imposter syndrome moments, it's more during my first few years of working, because I was basically thrown to Malaysia to uh, try and run a company, a small company, which I've never done before. And that's really to the point where you're throwing almost fresh grad trying to set up a whole company when he's not really had any work experience. I mean, it's a huge opportunity, but I would imagine anyone in my shoes then would definitely feel like an imposter. I was definitely an imposter. There wasn't even a syndrome there, because I'm doing something which I have no skills on, and I was tasked to learn and trying to set that up, right? And I think year in, year out, every time I do something and I achieve something great, it's something that I've learned and improved on. But you're always asking yourself, like, oh, being the position of a country manager back then, am I doing enough? Am I failing everyone else back in HQ? Am I failing my employees back then
Right.
too, right? And but the more and more I do it, and I agree with the pros that you've just listed out, Karen, is that I think as we grow older and we experience more things, the imposter syndrome is not necessarily we need to fear. It's more of a state of mind that we are uncomfortable with the uncomfortness of it. As in, we need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable in the case that
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be uncertainty. There's always going to be a room for not knowing something, not knowing how to do something. And as Magat pointed out in his earlier sharing, is that the quicker and the earlier you realize that this uncertainty is going to be a constant, the more you know how
Yeah.
to face that. Um, I don't know what you call it, imposterness, if that's such a word, right?
Mm.
And it's I think part of, like, it's a rite of passage of working and experiencing, and when you're doing something which is out of your comfort zone and something out of your skill set, that you will face it. But the more and more you feel like an imposter and you really experience the syndrome, the more and more you can learn how to take advantage of its pros and not be sucked into the cons, like feeling like you're a failure, right? Because failure is part of growing, and it's part of becoming someone who's less of an imposter but more of a master, I feel.
Ooh, that's good.
So one thing I thought about is whether or not this syndrome is linked up with your spectrum on the extroversion introversion kind of world, right? Because if you look at least in my experience, I look at people who have progressed well in their careers and the personalities that they exhibit. So you have two types, right? Let's say the two extremes. You have one introvert person, you have an extrovert person. And then usually the introverts who do really well are the ones who are really, really smart. And their intelligence are the ones that do talking. Like, they don't have to say much, but people know that these are the guys who are really capable in the subject. But the extroverts are typically the ones who are just, in my experience at least, they may not necessarily know everything, but they know how to own it nonetheless. So I think to a large extent, perhaps I don't know if you guys feel free to challenge me. If you guys want to challenge me, do tweet us on the Enablers Pod or on our Instagram. But could it be that imposter syndrome is something that is less forgiving for someone who's introverted, who's more likely to be more inward and to dwell on what they don't know, as opposed to extroverts who naturally just thrive and just, externalize their confidence? What do you guys think?
So I think even as an extrovert, they still do have an imposter syndrome, but they probably don't necessarily portray it. Like you said, there are people who are faking it till you make it. I know for a fact that there are people who are an extrovert and have confessed to me that they have some imposter syndrome in some of the things that they do. Essentially, maybe it doesn't apply to work. Maybe it's something else. So maybe they're very confident in their work, or hence they talk really fine at work. But then if you put them in like, I don't know, public speaking thing, they probably feel like they're an imposter. So it might not apply throughout their life, but in segments of their life, then potentially it's possible that it's there. Even in relationship, there are people who are really good at talking and everything, but just can never maintain a relationship because their imposter syndrome is that they feel like they can never be loved. Maybe there's like some issue ongoing. So yeah, there's like different levels of imposter syndrome, and they don't necessarily apply to all your life. Because even if you go as an introvert, right? Maybe their imposter syndrome are more prominent at work because you have to socialize and they don't feel confident in that sense. But then when they are in a setting where they're more comfortable, where around the people that they are very used to, maybe they're just amazing in having that kind of relationship or whatever that they want to do or they like to do apart from work.
I think that's a very good point. It's whether or not it's manifested, it doesn't deny the fact that it's there. So I think it's just that some people manifest it, some people don't. Not by choice, at least.
Okay, so following up the discussion that, there are people who feel imposter syndrome not throughout their lives, but like different segments of their lives. And I think this leads to our next point, where there are different types of imposter syndrome. So there are a few terms that I picked out from the internet from a bunch of different articles, and I think it's quite interesting to go through them. So one of them was the perfectionist. The person who's never ever satisfied with the things that they do, always push things to the last minute because they feel like they want to think about it, they want to do more about it, and then in the end not happy with the product because they didn't start earlier.
#Magat.
Oh no!
Oh my god, no.
Really, I find you very much a perfectionist. I feel like a lot of even the recordings that we do, you're also very critical about, it can be better.
I thought he's just very critical with his cheesecake. I remember the first cheesecake was being very good, and then since then his cheesecake has been amazing, guys, but he was just never satisfied.
Exactly.
Baking. Sorry, I was just I have to say baking is not enjoyable. The process is not. And I was talking to my friend yesterday. I was saying to her that I made cheesecake. And then what I find is that when you make cheesecake, you cannot have emotions because you just need to go strictly with what needs to be done and not be fueled by your emotion, your love or hate, or
Oh
because then it
no.
comes into the baking. For consistency, you need to be methodical, and then the fun and the joy is in the product being perfect. And then what she said to me was like, you just basically made baking the most boring activity ever.
I agree with your friend.
I was
Oh my
like,
goodness.
baking's a science, isn't it?
No. Well, baking is a science, but it's also baked with love. It's science with
Mm,
love. If you don't put
no,
love in your baking, you can't feel it.
no.
It tastes no, no,
You
no,
put
no.
love into
I
your baking, it's
disagree.
gonna be flat. It's gonna be burnt.
Well, not if it's a burnt cheesecake.
But yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Let's move on from cheesecakes to the next imposter. Okay.
All right. Okay. So the next imposter title is what they call the superhero. So the superhero essentially feels that they're inadequate. So then they would end up pushing themselves to work as hard as possible.
Mm,
Mm,
So, always a yes man, take all the work so that,
mm.
saving other people because they think they can do it and they push themselves to do more and more and more.
I
I can vibe
see.
with
So,
that. I can vibe with that.
yeah, these are the people who stay back in the office, like working until late nights, just trying to make it happen, whatever happen means.
Yeah. See,
Mm,
that was me when I first joined my lab group as a research assistant
Mm,
because I don't know why. I think I was trying to prove myself because I got into the job without an interview. Basically, it's just like a
mm,
connection.
mm.
And then I remember people going to the lab and how much rigorous the interview that they have to go through. And I'm like, oh,
oh,
I wonder if my PI then really thinks that I'm competent in the things that I do now. So then I was just like, yes, give me the weekend sample. I could do it. I have no life. I'll do this. I'll do that and do that. And I was like, you know
mm,
what? After a while, I was like, I can't do this. I'm pushing myself to the burning point. I need to set my boundaries. And then yeah, I learned it the hard way.
It's okay, Kyrene. Based on this definition, you're a superhero.
mm.
Oh well, was not anymore.
I think when you
Okay.
mentioned this version, I realized that I think this is the one I can relate to the most because even when I was a student, I always pushed myself to study very hard. Not because sometimes I study way too hard just because I think I never know enough and I'm never smart enough. I never identified myself as intelligent,
Mm,
and therefore I always strive for that. I just want
Mm-hmm.
to be more knowledgeable and smart enough to get the grades I need to go to the next level. But sometimes I drive myself crazy just doing more than what I should, I think, because of that identification.
Hmm. Well, I think that's more of the next type of imposter syndrome. So the next one is called the expert, where he or she's never satisfied with their level of understanding.
right.
So they would always strive to learn more. They feel like they never know enough about the topic to talk about the topic or to involve in the discussion with people who they think are an expert when in fact they probably just know less amount of the things that this person does.
Mm,
So they just
yeah.
keep reading and reading and reading and then just not using that information for anything because they feel they're not good enough to say.
Mm. Come back with that. Because, oh my god.
Oh, go on. We like some stories.
No, no. What you said is right. Like that example is more relatable to the third um, type of imposter
Mm.
syndrome.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's actually pretty common. Uh, I think one of the reason why I feel like there's a lot of people in that group is because people are not comfortable in saying I don't know in front of other people.
Yeah.
They can't. They feel like they're not at par with everyone because they feel like everyone knows a lot more than they do.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't want to be seen as incompetent in that sense of knowledge.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's why even during college or universities, like I mean, I've experienced it as well because you feel so not confident with your level of understanding of a certain thing that you even shy away even to reach out to ask and learn further, right? Because you're just scared that people find out that you're a fraud, that you don't know enough. Which is why I've always admired people who, even at the face of ignorance, even from my point of view, like I'm ignorant about something, they just ask.
Mm.
Like in some people, they're like, no questions are stupid. It's like if they don't know something, they just ask because that's just an opportunity for them to then know about it and learn about it, right? And I've always
Yeah.
admired that about people who just have that level of courage, just to the fact that, yeah, I don't know it. I'm stupid. Tell me why. Tell me what it is. Tell me how it is.
I hate,
I think
no, hold on, sorry. I hate when people use the term "I'm stupid." I was like, no, don't say you're stupid. You just don't know at that time. Just I just feel like no, you shouldn't put yourself in this pedestal of not knowing anything because you're stupid. You not know anything because you never got a chance to be or to search that topic specifically. But yeah, sorry.
yeah, I mean, yes, but there's also no such thing as a stupid question. I think there's a stupid way to ask a question.
Ooh, controversial.
Could you describe a bit more again?
I mean, I don't have an example, right? But like, if you feign ignorance, right? But then you know how to say like, okay, I have this question, I don't know this, and I think blah blah blah. You ask it in a way that is, insightful, intelligent, and prompts interest in the person to explain that. That's fine. But if it's something that is asked in a way that shows that you just have no interest to learn, you never did your research, and it's something so basic, then in a way it reflects badly on you. So I think for as long as you master the art of asking a question, and it's something that I myself need to work on because I'm always scared to ask a question for fear of looking stupid or being exposed, I think you'll be fine. So maybe, there's something that could help you ask more questions and be more forthcoming about your lack of understanding on something.
I just want to contrast your mastering the art of asking a question is what imposters certainly like to do is try to master the art of bullshitting. And this is something that I've certainly done before as well. But you don't know something, right? And you're in a setting where you need to seem professional. You need to seem to have that level of skill, but you certainly have no clue about it. So you beat around the bush. You pull jargons from here and there, trying to piece things together, and trying to spit out an answer that seems professional, seems like an expert, but really you're a bullshit expert. And I think I don't know about you guys, but over the years I come to appreciate people who can explain things very simplistically
because
like,
they're not bullshitting.
Because you're not bullshitting. Because if you can summarize and simplify something, that person really knows what it is all about. He's just trying to simplify for you so that it's easy for you to understand. But when someone overcomplicates something, it's either they just don't know how to express it well, or I think from my experience, it's very likely they're just bullshitting or faking it, right? That's the imposter there.
Okay, so the last point of the type of imposter syndrome is called the soloist. So the definition given is that this person is never able to accept help as self-worth because, this person is never able to accept help because they see that asking for help is them feeling incompetent because they relate self-worth with work or their productivity.
But I feel like that's self-defeating, right? Because you're not helping yourself to get out of the imposter state, because you won't help yourself to get out because you'll still be in the ignorant state.
Well, then it seems like if you ask for help, therefore you will become an imposter because you don't know. That's how I read it. So far I know. I think I know how to do it. But then if I do ask for help, that means I don't know, which means
Ah,
I am an imposter in the subject matter, and therefore I don't want to ask for help because I'm not an imposter. But then, is that imposter syndrome? I don't know. I cannot interpret this one very well based on
N-
what you're saying.
No, but I think you're right. I think you highlighted it well because the soloist is where you don't want to be revealed as a fake
fraud.
by
Yeah,
by asking. The expert is you don't want to reveal yourself as a fraud by speaking what you already know because you think it's not enough. The
yeah,
superhero is the moment you stop working, that you're not trying to fulfill that gap anymore. Hence, you're fake. You're not enough. And the perfectionist is perpetually just working and working because nothing's enough for the perfectionist, right?
Oh my gosh, I just thought like of an amazing example. Okay, so the example is, say, like a couple. So this girl is saying to her partner, "Oh, some issues with the water plumbing," and the guy refused to get help from anyone outside, and he would try and fix it, even though he knows nothing whatsoever to do with
mm,
plumbing.
mm,
But he feels that he can work it out because he's the
yeah.
man of the house. So he doesn't want to feel incompetent or being put down by just calling a plumber. So I think in that sense, that is an imposter syndrome right there.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example. I have a very similar example, but it's the other way around. Where the guy wanted to
Oh,
call the plumber, but the wife wanted to fix it. But yeah, that's a really good example.
fair, fair. Okay, fine. All in all, like imposter syndrome is, there's a lot of people experiencing it more than you know. And I think people always try to kind of cope with it and try to prevent it to be, taking over their lives essentially, because it, life is too short, guys. You just can't, be listening to all your negative thoughts. It's just a bit unfair. So I think there are a lot of things that you can do. One of the ways that I practice is to help other people, because essentially helping other people and trying to getting them to be confident and be, believe in their self is essentially talking to myself as well, because it's almost like talking to myself as a third person. And that if I feel like I'm sharing this advice to a person that I'm mentoring, then I have to, walk the talk, right?
Right.
So in that sense, it kind of helped me in a way to prevent an imposter syndrome setting in and being arrested in my thinking.
I think one way I coped and still coping with bouts of imposter syndrome in my life is so I think I'm very close to being the expert type or the superhero type of an imposter syndrome. The reason being is because I always feel that my level of understanding of a certain topic is not enough. And because of that, I shy away from speaking my mind or sharing with people what I think or have learned. But for you to overcome it, and this is how I feel like I've overcome it gradually, is to actually write it out. It's actually to express it out, like how I
Mm,
do it at this podcast or how I do in my writing. You forcing yourself to materialize your thoughts into words is a way of crystallizing to show how much knowledge you have. And once it's actually laid out, whether it's in audio form or writing form, it actually becomes proof of how much you know. And that becomes black and white evidence of, hey, this is the level that I actually know. And other people might come to it and be like, oh, I didn't know that. And it proves to you that you actually know a bit more than other people, or you have a certain level of competency which you had doubted yourself when you shouldn't have to. And I
Mm.
think for the superhero feeling, the feeling of inadequacy is, as I mentioned before, kind of feel it's a rite of passage where you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, of not knowing certain things, and
mm,
being humble in the sense that, hey, there's going to be a level of ignorance that is constant in my life. But as long as you know you can actually learn and grow out of that ignorance, that's fine. And that's how you overcome that stage of imposter syndrome, and then you move on to the next level of imposter syndrome, to the stuff that you don't know about, right? That's how
Mm,
I've faced it, and I think I will continue to face it like that.
mm,
Yeah, and for me, I think what my manager said to me in the past still rings in my mind. Like, you need to step up now. The time is now. You'll never know enough. You'll never be good enough, in
Mm.
your view, to wait to rise to the occasion. Just do it. Snap out of it.
Okay, as you guys can hear from Magat, that's all from us today. If you guys would like to reach out to us and share your experience with people that helped you to go through this imposter syndrome, or things that you're still struggling is, you can come talk to us, and then you can even private message us. One of us will always reply, because we enable you guys to do great things in life. So do reach out to us at the Enablers Pod on Twitter and Instagram.
And thank you for listening.
See you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.
I
I
feel
mean, it
like
could be.
so go on.
May roll eyes ulit ako, tapos.